Despite December's reputation for cozy, I actually did not read very cozy books in the month of December 2024. I told myself I wasn't going to try to read more to achieve my goal, and then I had a little sprint where I felt like maybe I should, and then I took the pressure off myself again and went back to just reading at whatever pace felt good. Let's take a look at the books I read in December, I'll tell you what I thought of them, and we'll also set up some tracking pages for January in my new journal. Hi, I'm Erin, and I love audiobooks because they're fantastic when you don't have time to read with your eyeballs. I've been working between two journals for 2024 for my reading, and we're going to start with the smaller one, which is the more recent of the two, this little traveler size, and just update the list of books that I've read in this year. This is a little teaser of the books I'm going to talk more about in this video, so if anything here takes your fancy and you want to hear my thoughts, stick around. December, I think, is a pretty busy month for all of us, so I expected to get not very much reading done, and then I ended up driving a lot, and that meant that I listened to a lot of audiobooks, which means that I read more than I expected to. In fact, I think I only finished one read with my eyeballs book, an ebook, in this entire month of December because I just did not have time to sit down with my Kindle, which makes me sad. I'm hoping to carve out some more time for just reading with my eyes in 2025. I think that would be really nice. When you're tracking monthly reading stats the way that I do, it's really interesting that you can see lifestyle changes reflected in your reading stats. Around about mid-year 2024, I started posting 2 videos a week consistently, and I've kept that up. And making that second video is essentially what has taken away my eyeball reading time, which is fine. Like, this is kind of my job now, so I can't be mad at that. But at the same time, that's why I don't get to read as many ebooks anymore. And I think it's really interesting to see that reflected in my reading stats. Also, this video is going up a little bit late. Thank you for your patience. I have just been enjoying taking a little bit of time off after New Year's. I was away dancing with my dance group over New Year, so I was kind of working in a different way, and it was just nice to relax for the first few days of 2025 and take it easy. I'm also updating my reading goal page here, which is a nice little bookshelf. I have one of these in the bigger journal too, and I sort of forgot about that. And at the time that I was doing this part, the month of December wasn't quite over, so I haven't added all of the books here. And I forgot to come back and do it, so that won't be in this video, but stick around for some final updates and my final flip-throughs of the 2 journals I used for 2024, and we can do that part together. Onward to my progress spread for December. This is a little calendar where I like to track the start and end dates of the books I'm reading and their star ratings and their Corpile scores. I've been using the Corpile rating system throughout 2024, and I am using my own rating system actually through 2025. I made a video about it recently. I'll have that linked in the description for you in case you want to check it out. But I will be sticking to Corpile for this final month in my 2024 reading journal stuff because I want it to be consistent, sort of start to finish. I don't want to change rating systems halfway through and then have the books that I'm reading in this month not compare properly to the ones before it. So we're sticking to Corpile just for now. Especially for my book bracket spread in the last journal before this one, I really need the Corpile rating numbers to be consistent for that to work, so that's a big part of it. Because December was such a hectic month, I didn't get to sit down throughout the month in a couple of little stints the way that I usually like to approach my reading journal. I kind of had to do it all at the end of the month, which is a little bit more stressful. Takes some time to do my spreads the way I like to, so that's always a little bit tricky, but you'll be able to tell which date I was filling this out on because that is the date where my reading will stop on this calendar. It won't go all the way to the end because at the time I was doing this, we hadn't reached the end of the month yet. I track my reading with an app called Storygraph that I've been using for a couple of years now, and I really like it. I have the link to my Storygraph down below in case you want to be friends over there, and I do also use and have Goodreads. I just get all of my stats stuff from Storygraph instead because I feel like it's more comprehensive. Also, if you're interested in seeing how I set up these December tracking pages at the beginning of my December setup in my journal, that's in my last reading journal video. I have a little playlist that has the whole series, so you can go and check that out if you're interested in how I set it up or the materials that I used. All of the stuff after this in this journal I will have linked to as much as possible down in the description as well. I use a lot of stuff when I'm doing these reading journal setups, so sometimes I run out of characters in the video description, but I'll do my best to link as much as I can for you, and if there's anything I haven't linked that you're interested in, you can just ask. I also like to have the little book covers represented for each of the books that I read in that month. Usually I do these with my HP Sprocket mini printer, but because I knew I was doing a lot, especially for my book bracket later on, hello Mitsu, come to visit, I actually just printed these ones out with my home printer this time on some sticker paper and cut them out with my Cricut, and that was much more efficient than printing a whole bunch of stickers with the HP Sprocket. Also, that would get really expensive because the paper for that thing is not cheap. I really didn't expect to read very much in December, so I thought I'd have enough page space over here on this progress page, but I ran out. So I know I'm going to be doing a little Dutch door for my first book review spread, so I'm just going to cut that off and use that as a little tip in over here so I can add some more book covers to this page without having to just start a new page. I'm using the same washi tape to add a little hinge onto this piece of paper so that it can flip out to the side, and I'm trying to just match it to the theme so that it makes sense in context. And this is going to give me space for tracking 4 more book covers over here, so we love a little workaround. I also like to have my star ratings and my core pile ratings on these pages too, so I can see that information at a glance. It really helps me figure out what my most favorite book of each month was, which is something I like to include on my reading stats page. And it's just kind of interesting information to have all in one place too. When we do the individual review pages for each of these books, I'll work out those scores and come back and fill this in as we go, but for now I'm just going to add the star rating stamps everywhere so that they're handy when I need them. Let's get started on my first review spread for the month, and this one is for our Page Mages book club book for the month of December. That's my little book club that I run through the channel membership program here on YouTube, so if you have joined the channel and subscribed to one of the tiers, it's kind of like Patreon, but right here on YouTube, then you can get access to my book club. Our lovely member Emma suggested this book for us. It's called Last Call at the Local by Sarah Grunda Ruiz. We actually had our Page Mages call and discuss this one pretty recently, just on New Year's Eve in my time here in Australia, and it was so interesting hearing everyone's thoughts, because this book, from its blurb, you're like, oh yeah, cute little rom-com, cozy vibe set in Ireland, sounds like fun. But this is actually secretly a really powerful book. It has so much representation for people who live with ADHD and people who live with specifically harm OCD. There is representation for you in this book. I know quite a few of my channel members went into this thinking like, oh, happy jolly book, and came out feeling very seen and maybe a little bit personally attacked as well. So just know that going in, there is a good chance that it will make you cry if you are someone who lives with either of those things. This one's a dual point of view romance. We are following Rain, who is a musician, a busker. She's from America and she's living in Ireland and kind of touring around and playing guitar, and a little too scared to play her own songs, but great at doing covers. She waltzes into Jack's bar one day, and without realizing that he is the owner, she tells him all the things that she thinks could be improved about the place, and he hires her on the spot to do just that. And of course, sparks fly as they work together on making this place the best thing that it can be. See what I mean? It sounds innocuous, but once you get in there, it's got some stuff that will bring tears to your eyeballs. I've gone with a kind of grassy green washi tape at the bottom to represent the Emerald Isle on which this book is set. I've got a little kitty cat in the top corner because there's a cat who's quite central to this story. I think his name's Sebastian. Gorgeous. And a little ukulele because I don't apparently own any guitar stickers, and that is the closest I could do for Rain's beautiful, I think it was an acoustic Gibson guitar that features quite heavily in the story as well. Over on the second of these 2 spreads that I'm doing for this book, on the other side of the Dutch door, I'm adding the questions. These were the discussion questions for the Page Mages discussion when we talked about this book. I always like to have these in my journal and just answer them for myself, and I like to have that done before our chat so that I can use it to kind of lead the discussion and keep us somewhat on track, but we go off on tangents and I love that. Fair warning, if you read my reviews that I write on the pages in this video, you might run into some spoilers for these books, but I will never give you spoilers in the voiceover, so please don't feel like you need to be concerned and pause or turn off the sound or anything like that. It's only in the written parts, so read those at your own risk. A little tidbit I will dangle for this book though is that it has one of the cutest first kiss build-up kind of scenes in any book that I have ever read. I really liked that about it. Also, because so much of this story took place in a bar, I thought I would add a little kind of left of field question here. I asked my channel members what they thought would be in a cocktail if this book was a cocktail, and then I had to Google it to answer it for myself because I don't really drink, so I was like, I've got actually no idea. Hard to answer my own question. Time to give this book a rating. If you're not familiar with the core pile rating system, each of these categories, the initial stands for character, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and enjoyment. So I rate those out of 10. Get a total score out of 70, divide that by 7, and that gives you a decimal point number, which relates to a star rating, which I have a reference for back here in my journal. My rating system for next year, I won't have to do this anymore, and I'm looking forward to not having to flip back to a reference page. I gave this book 6.68 on the Corpal rating scale, which meant that it was a 3 3/4 star book. Just gonna flip back to my progress page as well and make sure that information is added there too. Onward! This book I actually talked about a little bit in my last reading journal video. This one, because I read the book before it in the series last time, I mentioned that this was the one I stumbled across first and got me interested because of its wonderful title. The book before this was Can't Spell Treason Without Tea, and this one is called A Pirate's Life for Tea. I feel like you could probably see why that would draw me in. I love tea, and I love stories about pirates, so here we are. This series is by Rebecca Thorne, and the series is called Tea and Tomes? No, sorry, it's the other way around, Tomes and Tea. It's a queer, cozy fantasy series, and we have the same characters central to this book as in the first one, but we also introduce some new characters as well, one of whom is a pirate. But she's not like pillaging and plundering, she's actually stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, so she's kind of like a Robin Hood pirate, if that makes sense. I mentioned with regard to the book before this one that I don't know if I'm necessarily a cozy fantasy person. I feel like I like my stakes to be a little higher than cozy, but I did feel like this one, the stakes were a little higher, so maybe I enjoyed this one slightly more than the previous. I had this paper from one of the Cora Korea Craft subscription boxes that I got recently that has a beautiful vintage looking map on it, and I thought, well, that's too perfect for piracy, isn't it? So I'm using that as the basis for my background here. I'm loving doing the Dutch doors for my reviews, so I'm doing that again here, removing part of the right page, and I wanted it to look like the map was just continuing onto that page that's behind, so I cut a bit off a little triangle here and stuck that down on the bottom right corner just to make it feel like it flows. I used my little corner punch tool on the bottom corner here, but I actually forgot to do the top one, so that's a bit uncomfortable. Sorry if that feels weird to you. And this red washi tape was still out on my desk from doing the little tip-in earlier on, so I thought I'd use that too. And I also found an amazing sheet of pirate stickers at a local discount store, and I knew I had this book coming up for my reading journal, so I jumped on it. Unfortunately, I can't find them anywhere online that I can link you to them though, so I'm sorry if you just fell in love with those pirate stickers, but if you live in Brisbane, check out the Stack's discount stores in the Westfield shopping centres, because they are where I got them, so maybe you can give it a shot. I've kind of matched my layout more to the stickers than to the book cover, which is actually blue for this one, but that's okay, I think it's fine. I've also opted for this setup because I knew I had kind of limited time to set up my reading journal this time around. I've gone for bigger prints of the book covers, also because I knew I was doing them with my big home printer on A4 sheets of sticker paper rather than my little sprocket size prints. I've done bigger ones for all of the books that I read throughout December so that I don't have to letter the titles as frequently. I'm still going to do a few, but for the ones where I think they're big and readable like this, I'm just going to use that as my lettering and carry on. I read this one pretty close to the beginning of the month, and I'm doing my setup at the end of the month, and this is why I like to try to do it a little bit closer to when I actually finish the books, because as much as I know I enjoyed reading this book, I didn't find it difficult to read or anything, I don't really remember much of it at all. I do find that some books I remember really well when I really enjoyed them, but this is one of those books that's just kind of bounced off my brain like it's made of Teflon, so I had to go back and read some of the Goodreads summary and stuff to really know what I was talking about to put this review together. I know there's been some talk about that with the end of year, like people sometimes get a bit dramatic about how many books other people read and how many books they've read and comparisons and stuff, and some people think that you should read less so that you remember everything that you read. This is just entertainment for me, it's just funsies. I don't feel like I need to remember every book that I read. If it entertained me and I enjoyed it in the moment, then I feel like it served its purpose for me, so that's my stance on this. All of it is supposed to be fun. Reading the books, keeping the reading journal, all of that is supposed to be fun. So if you're finding at any point that something isn't fun for you, it might be time to make a change. And that's going to be different for everyone. And it's okay to read more or to read less or to read faster or to read slower or to prefer a different format to other people. Anyway, 7s across the board in the Corpal rating system, which means it was 49 out of 70, divides very nicely into 7, which gives me 4 stars for A Pirate's Life for Tea. After a full year of using the Corpal rating system and noticing how it makes me so much more critical of books than I would be if I were just kind of going by a gut feeling, I think I'm really trying to rate things more generously in these past couple of months, and that might be an example of that where I'm like, I don't really remember, so let's give everything a 7. We're now entering that week of December when I decided I was going to try and really shoot for my reading goal. I'd set my goal to 100 books. Last year I made it 80 and I hit that pretty well, so I thought it was pretty doable. It turned out to be less doable than I thought, and that is totally fine. Like, I'm not mad at myself for not hitting my goal. It's a silly thing that I set for myself and it doesn't mean anything. But for a second there, I let it mean something and I started trying to read some novellas to pad out my number, and this was one of those. This is Booked for the Holidays by Liz Maverick. It's an Audible original. If you've had any experience with Audible originals yourself, you will know they can be really hit and miss. They usually have a full cast and they are typically, at least the ones I've come across, are pretty fluffy rom-coms. This one is no exception. It's very Hallmark vibes. If you're into that, you might enjoy it. I'm not really into that. Our male main character, Dove, is a gentleman who is mourning the loss of his grandmother, who was a famous mystery author, and her publishers don't know that she's passed. They send Abby over to try and get a copy of whatever manuscript she has for them, and she finds out what's going on, and she offers to help Dove finish the book. He was planning to do it on his own, but she offers to help him, and hijinks and romance ensue. It's a cozy little New York winter kind of a story. There are some snowed-in trope vibes, but this one I just felt like was a little bit too silly for me. Really, neither of these main characters are equipped for the job that they've taken on themselves, so it's a little unbelievable to me to think that they could accomplish this with the skill that they supposedly don't have. But I know a lot of people don't go to romance books for believability, so I understand if this is the kind of thing that would really appeal to you, and I do think it's fun and it's cute and it's easy and it's not supposed to be that serious, so if you enjoy that kind of thing, maybe you'll like it. For me, this one was pretty lukewarm. And honestly, I don't know why I was choosing Christmas books when I was feeling kind of grinchy this Christmas, but there we go, 5.14 on the Corpal scale, which is going to make it 3 stars, which is not a bad rating. It doesn't mean that I hated the book or anything, it just means that it wasn't one of my favorites. There's a category in my new rating system that's for heart, and I just don't feel like this book had any. So there you go. Flipping back to the progress spread to make sure that I've got that star rating and that Corpal rating down on this page for reference, and then we can go on to the next book. This one's also an Audible original short, although it's not Christmas themed the way the previous one was. I picked this book for a few reasons. Obviously, first of all, it's another short Audible original and I was trying to get that Goodreads goal. Secondly, because this one actually has an Australian storyline going on. Our main character of this book is Australian, and this one was written by Adeline Knight. She also wrote Lonely Hearts Radio, which was another Audible original that I listened to earlier this year, which also featured one of the main characters as an Aussie who was in New York. This one features an Aussie who's come home to Australia. It's set on Lord Howe Island, and I was just really craving some Australian stories, some Australian voices. I feel like I don't kind of make enough room for that in my reading practice, and I was feeling like it. So I was like, let's see what you got, Audible, and unfortunately it didn't have much for me. I didn't really like any of the characters in this book, particularly our main female character, Beau. She just was really flighty and not willing to listen to people and really opinionated and set in her ways and not open to change, really. And she annoyed me quite a bit, unfortunately. Also, when books' main release is audio, and that's kind of the only way that they're available to you, it's really frustrating when one of the narrators doesn't do a great job. I felt like the narrator for Beau was reading a school project, and that's just not the most emotive way to read an audiobook. So the guy who voiced Griffin was actually quite good at his role, so it was kind of a little bit of balance. It made it less difficult to listen to when it was on to his chapters, but I just didn't really have a good time with this one, which was disappointing, but that's okay. I stuck it out because it was only short. I listened to it, and I'm not giving it a kind of dual page Dutch door spread. I'm just giving it the one, just like I did for the previous, because I just don't feel like I can do much with it. Anyway, some pretty low scores on my Corpal categories there. This one's coming out with 4.57 as its final Corpal score, which is going to give it 2.5 stars, so pretty lukewarm. And I think that's an appropriate rating for this one. I also accidentally stamped my star rating stamp upside down, and I'm not mad at that either. It's okay. It's okay. Something else I want to go looking for is some Aussie-themed stickers to go in this kind of journal spread, because I don't really feel like I have any. I found this sheet from STICKII in my collection that had some little reptiles and stuff on, and so I've gone with that because it feels the most appropriate, but I don't really know if these are accurate to the critters we actually have in Australia, but they're going to have to do. Once we've got those down on the page, that will be it for the Wild Heart spread, and we can carry on to the next one, which unfortunately was another book I found kinda underwhelming. This one is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore, and this is one of those cases where I think Book Talk doesn't know what it's talking about, or at least it didn't hit for me. It wasn't bad, let me get that straight. I don't think this book was bad, I just don't think it's worth the hype. I don't know if it's because of the author's last name, but a lot of people are comparing the small town vibes in this one to Gilmore Girls, and I don't think I can agree with that. I'm a huge Gilmore Girls fan. I watched it growing up. I rewatch it like constantly. It's a comfort show for me, and this is not it. I think if you go in not expecting a Gilmore Girls level of cozy though, you might not find that it's too bad of an experience because it is a very readable book. It's cute, it's pretty fluffy. I just think it's a little bit like basic and derivative of a romance story. I've read this book before, just not by this author and not by this title. But do you know what is great about this book is the fact that I had stationery that is a perfect match for it. In fact, even the collection shares its name. I had stuff from the Pumpkin Spice collection from Paper Monogatari, and I was like, look, this is my opportunity to really do this stuff some justice. So even though it isn't one of my favorite books that I've read this year, I wanted to really go ham a little bit on the pages for it and just make it really cute because it was an opportunity to do that. The main character in this one, Jeannie, has just moved from the big city to take over running a little cafe for her aunt, and she's moved into this small town dynamic where everyone knows each other and they're all really gossipy, and there is that small town farmer who keeps helping her out and they are attracted to each other instantly because of course they are. His name is Logan. It's even a name from Gilmore Girls. Wow. I just felt like the characters were pretty shallow in this one. I didn't feel like any part of the story really had much depth, which is fine. Sometimes you want that, but it wasn't really what I was hoping for out of this book. Sometimes Book Talk gives really good recommendations, and sometimes Book Talk is like, I've never read before and this book had a spicy scene and I went woo-hoo-hoo-hoo, and that's the recommendation, and that's what I think this is. Also, I guess if you're just not vibing a narrator, that doesn't help your experience with an audiobook either. I did this one on audiobook through my library, and I thought actually for a long time that the narrator was the same person who'd narrated the Practical Magic audiobook that I listened to back in October, and I don't think it was. I looked into it, but they sound very, very similar, and that is a very kind of older matronly lady that just doesn't seem to vibe with the character of Jeannie for me. She's very scatterbrained and modern, and it just didn't feel like the right fit, but that's just my opinion. Look, I have read and loved the Love Light series by B.K. Borison, and if I want small town romance, I go to her. That's simple as that. So if you were specifically looking for like an autumn spicy romance small town story, I would definitely recommend going for Business Casual, which is the fourth in the series, but they're somewhat standalone, so it's okay if you kind of just jump in there. I didn't hate this book. I didn't find it difficult to finish or anything, but I won't be going back to this author. I don't think that once was enough for me. Gotta give the book a rating, and this one I'm doing mostly 5s and 6s, which means it's going to be 5.29 on the Corpal scale, which is going to put it into that 3-star category again. I'm excited because now we get to talk about a book that I really liked that I would not have come across if I wasn't trying to hit that goal and just read some short books, because this one wouldn't have been really on my radar. This one is The Yellow Wood by Minnie Dark, and it is going to fill that niche for the Australian voices that I was really looking for. In fact, one of the narrators for this Audible original is Remy He, and he is an actor. He was in Crazy Rich Asians, he was in Marco Polo, he was in The Princess Switch 3, and he's a Malaysian-Australian guy who lived in Brisbane for at least a little while, because I think my city kind of claims him as their own. He voiced the chapters in this book that are from the point of view of Griffin, and he did a fantastic job. Griffin, coincidentally, was also the name of the male main character in Wild Hearts, so that's a weird coincidence, I guess. And the other narrator for this story was Aisha Idara, and she's an Australian theatre actress, and she also did a spectacular job narrating Amber's parts of this story. This book was written so beautifully. I have raved a little bit in the past about Trent Dalton's writing. He is another Brisbane author. There's something about these florid, poetic Australian-based authors that there's a particular voice that they have, and I feel like this book had that. It was spectacularly written and very, very beautifully delivered in audiobook, so I feel like you got the full brunt of that. This is what I mean about the Audible originals being so hit and miss. I had two that I thought were pretty lukewarm, and then this one I thought was phenomenal. Amber has grown up traveling the world with her mum. She isn't really someone who stays in one place for a long time. She meets Griffin at university in Sydney, and they hit it off and have a bit of a whirlwind romance, but it's not the right time for them because their goals are very different. Amber never intended on staying in one place, and Griffin is trying to build a life as an artist, so he's wanting to stay put and get established. It's so interesting the way this story follows these two characters over several periods of their life, and the way that their lives come close and drift apart, and they cross paths and they just miss each other. It's quite poetic, and that's really appropriate because quite a bit of the book, the title definitely, and also some of the plot revolves around the poem The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, which is what I've just printed with my little foam memo here, so I can have that represented on the page. It's all about the choices we make and the paths that lead us through life and where they brush with other people and where they diverge. If you're someone who's interested in the same kind of books as me, I definitely recommend giving this one a go. I don't think that you need Australian context to enjoy it. There is one moment around the first time that the two characters meet where I was a bit worried we were going into Manic Pixie Dream Girl territory. Griffin asks Amber where she's from because she has this weird accent that's an amalgamation of all of the places that she's grown up, and she says Earth, and I was like, oh no, Zooey Deschanel, let's go, what's going on here? But no, her character does actually have her own growth throughout the story, so that's a relief. I'm giving this one pretty high Corpile scores across the board. The total's going to be 8.14, which is going to translate to 4.5 stars for The Yellow Wood by Minnie Dark. That makes it the highest rated from December so far, but it's not actually going to be my highest rated December read overall. We just haven't got to that one yet. I've decided not to do a Dutch door for this next one as well. This is Can I Tell You Something by Holly June Smith. This one's another Christmas novella, not within the Plus catalogue this time of Audible, but I read a recommendation for this somewhere and I was like, okay, that sounds like fun. The premise of this one is that our main character, Hannah, has gone on her annual holiday to the French Alps with her family, and her brother's roommate best friend is tagging along. Turns out he's Hannah's favourite erotic audio content creator, and she is in no way prepared to have him walk into her life. It sounds really fun, right? It's fine. I didn't find it to be bad necessarily, but there were a few things about it that made me go, ooh, weird power dynamic, bit icky, bit manipulative maybe. Wasn't totally for me. I found that I had to really step away from my morals in order to really get some enjoyment out of this book. I just didn't like the way that the character of Cam, the guy, knew things about Hannah that gave him an edge and made him able to sort of play her, and she just went with it. But I will say the spicy scenes in this one were definitely spicy, and if you're into that in books, then you'll probably enjoy those parts. I mean, just from the blurb, I think you know what you're getting yourself into based on the plot. And I do think the ending was pretty sweet. It didn't end in a really negative place for me, but I still feel a bit weird about this one. I haven't decided yet if I want to read more from this series. I don't know if they're all kind of Christmas themed or not, but the series is called Snowbound Secrets and this is the first one. So if they are kind of Christmassy, I'll probably leave it for quite some time, but let's give it some Corpile rating action. I think you know where we're going with this. This one's going to end up with 5.14, which is going to give it another 3-star rating, which I am very okay with. I went through and popped post-its on my pages so I knew which books were going to sit approximately where, so I could work out how much of this journal I have left for end-of-year stats later on, but that kind of gave away what we're doing next. It's Gwen Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. And this was my highest rated book for December. This was so much fun. Most of the recommendations I've seen for this book online have been comparing it to A Knight's Tale meets Heartstopper. I actually think if you've read Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, it's a bit more in line with that than with Heartstopper. I feel like Heartstopper's really cozy and kind of like soft and gentle on your heart, whereas this one is a little bit more like dry and witty. In a post-King Arthur and Merlin Camelot world, we find our two protagonists, Gwen short for Gwendolyn and Art short for Arthur. Gwen is the daughter of the King of Camelot, and she is betrothed to Art, who is a descendant of King Arthur and a future lord. Only they both kind of hate each other, and they're both queer. Gwen has a huge crush on the only lady knight who competes in the jousts and the sword competitions, and she catches Art kissing a stable boy one day and makes a deal with him. This is like fake dating in a way that I've never come across it before, because it usually ends with the people who are pretending to date together, and in this case, that is not where we're headed at all. I already had a sprocket print of the cover for this one done, so I didn't print a large one for it, which means my title and my author information is really small on the book cover, which is why I'm adding it with some stamps here, because it's fun and I had some stamps that I thought would be perfect for it, but also it's going to be a lot easier to read down the track. I am 37 years old and my eyesight is not what it was, and it's not going to get better, you know? So this is just kind of me future-proofing my journal, so when I look back through them in the future, I still know what I was talking about. I've cannibalized this William Morris calendar that I bought recently. I used some of it in the initial setup for my next reading journal as well. It's after this one, and I used some of it on the Yellow Wood spread too, so that's what the paper is at the top and bottom here. I did find it on Amazon, so I can link you to that one at least. And those awesome square letter stamps I picked up from Portobello Road Markets when I was in London back in October. They were very expensive, but I have zero regrets. I got the whole alphabet, that's why it cost so much. I'm pairing it up with some excellent Lady Knight stickers that are from a sheet from STICKII, and also these little herald ones that I just thought would be a fun way to add those stats that I've been adding, like the format, the source, the dates read, and then I had one left over. I probably didn't need to do an extra one, but I wasn't sure what to do there, so I ended up just putting my Corpal rating in its own separate section, even though it's also going to be on the Corpal sticker, but that's fine. We can have it in two places to balance out the page layout. That's okay. Also, in order to get a really clean stamp out of those capitals, I had to use a lot of ink to get into all the nooks and crannies, and then I actually had to wait overnight for it to dry, so this spread took me more than a day, kind of. This book is definitely on the darker end of the YA spectrum than you would find in Heartstopper or in Red, White and Royal Blue. There is some violence that I don't think you'd find in either of those other books, but there's also found family, there is coming of age, there is a lot of growth for all of the characters. It's funny and it's heartwarming, and there's a quote from Casey McQuiston endorsing it on the cover as well, so that's always a good sign. This is the one lonely ebook that I managed to finish in the month of December, and I took my time with it. I did have a couple of nights where I wanted to stay up reading, and I was up maybe a bit later than I should have been, but I had to be a bit responsible. Also, my camera cut out, I'm sorry, while I was filming this one, so here are my Corpal ratings for this one. Very, very high, 8.71 across the board, which gave us 4.5 stars for this one. So the time it took me to read it is not reflective of my enjoyment of the book. It wasn't the book's fault that I had to be slow about it. I was just really busy. On to my last kinda short attempt at getting back up to my reading goal number for the month. This one is a non-fiction book actually, also from the Audible Plus catalogue, also an Audible original, but not as predictable as some of the others that I've shared with you, because this one is The Secret History of Christmas by Bill Bryson. And this one is actually narrated by Bill Bryson himself, which is a lovely little extra something. I had never heard his voice before this one actually, and I was a bit surprised. His accent is really interesting, I guess from growing up in the States and moving to England. He's developed a really interesting kind of in-between accent. I read A Short History of Nearly Everything years and years and years ago, so I knew that it was going to be a funny kind of rollicking ride, but I really, really loved this little history of Christmas story. Going all the way back to Saturnalia with the Romans and coming through history to catch us up to where we are now, Bill explains what he can about how we got to the Christmas that we celebrate today and how it differs around the world. And it was really interesting to me because obviously Australian Christmas is pretty different to some other places in the world, given that we have it in summer. I think the part of this book that was the most interesting to me was about the history of Christmas carols, because I learned that Christmas carols pretty much fell out of favor because some of the Puritans wanted people to stop being so happy and celebratory on Christmas, and somebody in like the 1800s decided that they wanted to collect all of that knowledge and revive it and keep records, and it's thanks to those people that we still have some of those older Christmas carols today, which is actually really similar to Morris dancing, which is a hobby that I have, and I just thought it was so interesting, those parallels, and Bill Bryson actually drew those parallels to Morris in his story as well, so amazing stuff. I realise that the season no longer tis, but if you are interested in putting stuff on your Christmas TBR and you like a little bit of non-fiction, I definitely recommend this one. It is a very quick and easy listen. It's just on Audible and it's free, so that's handy. You don't even really have to have a subscription. I know there is a variation on Corpile that is designed for non-fiction. I haven't tried it, and since I know I'm not using Corpile very, very soon, like from now, I figured I would just try out my own non-fiction rating system for this one, which is the Mitsu system. Once again, this is linked in the description, like my systems that I came up with. I've had some good feedback on the Mitsu one already because I don't read that much non-fiction, and so obviously people who read more of it are going to have a more insightful approach to this, so the system will probably maybe change over time, but it's ended up giving me 19 out of 25, which is 3.8 stars for this read. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to stick to that decimal point number for my books or if I'm going to round up to like the closest quarter star. I probably will keep the number but round the stars for ease of stamping and stuff, but the number will help me with things like the book bracket, like the Corpile score, being able to denote books that have the same star rating, which one I technically enjoyed more. And we're on to my last read for December and my last read for 2024, and this one was a little buddy read with my friend Rachel. This is The Kingdom of Sweets by Erica Johansson, which is a story that's based around the Nutcracker in a very different way. It's the Nutcracker like you've never seen it before. I love the ballet of the Nutcracker. I was a little ballet girl growing up, and I go and see it with my friend Rachel whenever I can every year. And we had just been to see the Queensland Ballet's production of the Nutcracker for 2024 when we started this book, and whoa, was it like whiplash. This book is so dark. The Nutcracker Ballet follows a little girl called Clara who is given a Nutcracker doll by a slightly wacky toy maker. When she goes to bed after the Christmas party that night, she has these like hallucinatory dreams. I don't know, maybe she ate too much cheese, and basically the Nutcracker turns into a prince and takes her through this fairy candy realm. And everyone's like, oh, Princess Clara, so lovely to meet you, let's dance for you. And then she wakes up, and that's basically the story of the ballet, right? Light, fluffy, cute. Not so for the Kingdom of Sweets. In this story, Clara has a twin sister, Natasha, and she is the main character of this story, and they are cursed by Dr. Drosselmeyer, the mad toy maker guy. When they're christened, he decrees that Clara is light and Natasha is dark, and as a result, Clara goes through life with beauty and grace, and Natasha finds that life is really difficult for her and she's bookish and she doesn't like to be around people, and they kind of blame Drosselmeyer for this. Drosselmeyer rocks up to their family Christmas party on their 17th birthday and gives Clara a nutcracker, while he gives Natasha a creepy clown doll that tries to attack her. Clara's nutcracker actually does kind of turn into a prince and take her into fairy, and Natasha follows and finds that this is not like the fluffy fairy of the ballet that we know. If you've read the Cruel Prince series, the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black, this is much more like her version of fairy, where there are bargains and there is evil and there is mischief. And the Sugar Plum Fairy in this story is not here to delight you with her fouettes. She is here to make a deal that you can't get out of and show you her scary, scary teeth. I thought this book was quite interesting, definitely, and it kept me engaged, but I felt like the writing was a little dry, a little bit like rigid. It had some room to do something really beautiful, and it just kind of, I feel like it didn't take it. It did keep surprising me though. I obviously had no idea what to expect out of it. And something I thought it did really well was take the like social and political context of the time that the Nutcracker was kind of set, which is a small town in Germany in the early 1800s, and really expand on that and give the girls some context throughout later parts of their lives as well and what's going on in the world at those times. It was a pretty dark and sometimes pretty violent and confronting way to end the year, but I don't regret it. I did enjoy this book quite a bit. And that is reflected in my score for this one. I've rated it pretty highly across the Corpile categories. It's not going to get us into like 4.5 star territory, but it's pretty good. I gave this one 7.29 on the Corpile score rating system, so that's going to translate to a 4-star book. Now that all of my book review spreads are done for the month, we can flip over to my December stats page and add all of my statistics here that Storygraph has very conveniently compiled for me. I read 10 books over the course of December, 2,575 pages total. That includes audiobooks because Storygraph can convert that for me. 63% of those were books with 300 to 499 pages. 38% had less than 300 pages. On average, it took me 5 days to finish a book, and I read 10% nonfiction to 90% fiction, which is way more nonfiction than usual for me. My main genres were romance, contemporary, LGBTQIA+, fantasy, YA, and history. 66% of the books I read I sourced through the library, the other 34% I bought or I used an Audible credit for, which I pay for, so obviously that also counts as bought. My standout book was Gwen Art Are Not in Love with its core pile rating of 8.71, which is really high, and as far as format, we've kind of already talked about this, but 90% audiobook because I only read one ebook this month, and that is the other 10%. My average rating, I actually forgot to fill out my ratings before I checked that, so this is wrong. It says 3.75. I've since added all my ratings to Storygraph, and the actual average rating was 3.63, which is close enough that it doesn't bother me too much, honestly. Now let's flip back to my previous journal, to the book bracket spread, and fill out this right side. This is going to be so much fun. So these are all of the top-rated books for each month throughout the second half of the year. I've got Starling House by Alex E. Harrow up in July. We've got A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal in August. Business Casual by B.K. Borison in September. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride in October. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder in November, and Gwen Art Are Not in Love for December. And based on their core pile ratings, I'm just working out which one rated higher, and it goes into the next round of the book bracket. This really didn't work so well for the first half of the year. Check and Mate just kind of like swept everything out, but it's actually working better this time around. Business Casual ended up going against itself a couple of times, which is kind of funny, and A Good Girl's Guide to Murder and Business Casual both had the exact same core pile rating, so I decided to just flip a coin for that one. This is an Aussie 20-cent piece. It's actually a special edition one, so it has heads on both sides, but I'm going to count the Queen Elizabeth side as heads and the other side I'm calling tails. So heads will be for Business Casual and tails will be for A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. So I'm flipping the coin and it's come up tails, which means A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is going to go through to the next round in this instance, but we're going to have to flip it again for the next round, so stay tuned. It kind of doesn't really matter though, because there is one book that has a higher rating than everything, so this is just sort of for funsies. Business Casual won the second toss, so it's going through to the next round, but Gwen Art Are Not in Love has a higher rating than Business Casual, which means in the final here, it's going to win for the second half of the year, and with 8.71, it's got a higher rating than Check and Mate as well, which means it is my top rated book of the year, and I pretty much only just read it. That's pretty wild. I honestly think the fact that I've been deliberately trying to use the core pile rating system— oops, I got some ink on my cover of my journal. It's okay, it came off. I think the fact that I've been trying to rate really generously with core pile probably played into that a little bit, but I'm not mad at it. I think Gwen Art was really good, so let's have a little flip through of everything I read in December and how I tracked it all in my journal. This is not the end of the video though, because we still have to set up for January in my new journal. This traveler size journal has been so much fun. If you are new to reading journaling and you're scared of a larger journal like you see so many people using, I couldn't recommend using a traveler's journal to dip your toe in more, because having less page space makes you feel like you have to fill the page less, which really takes the pressure off. So if you're into the idea of collage style journal spreads, but you don't want to jump into something like a B5 or a square or even an A5 if that feels too big for you, try Travelers. I recommend it. The journal I'm moving into is a 9 by 9 inch square, so it has so much more page space than I have been using in this one, but I think if I run out of pages towards September again like I did this year, I will be finishing up the year in another traveler's size journal, because this was just the best. I'll be keeping my eye out on the Archer and Olive traveler size releases throughout the year, but I have one in reserve from Notebook Therapy that came with my lucky bag at the moment too, so I've got one ready to go. This has also made me think I might want to try one out for my regular day-to-day bullet journal too though, so I don't know, watch this space. Maybe we move to traveler size for the bullet journal and we move the memory keeping out of the bullet journal. We'll see. The bullet journal's A5 for the first 6 months though, because I've already set that one up. I realized as I was flipping through that I haven't actually updated the calendar, the progress spread over here, so I just want to finish up the last little bits here because the month of December was over by this point. And now I can switch to this beautiful embroidered square journal. If you haven't seen the initial setup for this one already, it is on my channel. I will make sure it's linked in the description in case you want to see what my annual beginning of the year trackers are this time, but here's a little look through. And I've deliberately baked in some flexibility here. I've left a couple of blank spreads in case I decide I want to add anything else. But this is going to be my first spread for January. It's a cover page, it's my stats page, and it's my progress all in one because my gosh, is this a lot of page space. I don't know if we can really call it a theme when I'm only really doing one page for a setup for a new month this time around, or one spread rather, but I'm using this PET tape from the Washi tape shop. It's the Oceanic Breeze floral tape as the basis for my decoration here, and I just picked out a couple of washi tapes to match with it and this beautiful Archer & Olive calligraph. It's kind of a greeny grey. It has been very hot and very humid and very sweaty here, so I'm really looking to look at some cool colours to make me feel better. Originally, I lettered January with the smaller brush end of this pen, but I decided it was a bit too small. I wanted something a bit bolder, considering I have so much page space, so I went for a larger one with the other end of the pen, and I'm cutting that out. I've done this on sticker paper, so I can just peel off the backing and stick it right over the top of those florals that I put right in the middle of the page. Got this handy little template ruler that I'm using for my circles for my pie charts this time. I'm usually pretty blasé about where I put them, but for this one I thought if they were all in a line and evenly spaced, that would look really nice. So I've popped those down the right side of the first page, and I'm adding the ones that don't require charts for their tracking down the left side. I'm using the smaller end of that Archer & Olive calligraph. I got this one with one of the Archer & Olive subscription boxes in 2023, and it was before they were giving the pen colours names, so I don't know what you would call it, but I do really like their calligraph pens. We were already into January at the time I was setting this up, so I wanted to make sure I was doing something that would be cute but also pretty efficient, and when I want that I tend to go for this little fail-safe combo, which is 2 washi tapes that are complementary in colour and a little bit of floral tape over the top, and it just works like a charm every time. Also, I do usually only track 3 little pie charts worth of goodness. This bottom one I've decided to make non-fiction versus fiction just because I've been finding I've been more interested in non-fiction than I have been previously of late, so I thought that would be an interesting thing to add to my stats. I've also added time listened on the other side there because that's something I thought would be interesting to have a look at. I've been having Storygraph track my audiobook progress just as pages up until now, and I've had no problems with that, but I thought it would just be an interesting little experiment, and if I don't like it, I can switch it off because Storygraph is powerful like that. Also, I don't know what's up with me and calendars lately. I don't seem to be able to set one up without making some kind of weird mistake lately, but this is no different. This is my little progress calendar. I've tucked it into the top left corner here because I wanted it to have lots of space still left on the page for all my little book covers and my star ratings and my rating numbers if that's something I decide to keep. I completely missed a column when adding my numbers here and I somehow didn't realize until now. Whoops. I have my white paint marker ready to go though, so it's a pretty easy one to fix. And once I'm happy with all of the calendar-y stuff that I have to put down here, then I will also add a little bit of decoration onto this page to match the opposite one, so they feel like they go together. These pages feel truly massive compared to the traveler size that I've been working in. There is just that much room. Like, this took up 3 spreads in my previous journal, whereas I can put it all on one here. Even in the B5, I didn't feel like I could do that, so that is so interesting to me. As of right now, I really like that I can have all of this stuff on one spread because it means I'm going to have more pages left over for the book reviews, which means I might be able to fit a whole year into one journal this time. We'll see. But for now, this journal is just one big experiment because this is my first time in a square, and I think it's a slightly larger than usual square. It's 9x9 instead of 8x8, so it's just going to be a bit of a ride to work out what works for me and what doesn't. It's also really hard to shoot because the book is just so big, it takes up so much desk space, and I can only zoom out my lens so far, but I can just fit the whole thing in the frame, so hopefully that's just going to be fine. This journal is an experiment in every way, apparently. And that is my reading journal set up for January and ready to go. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me, and if you've been journaling alongside me, I hope you're really happy with what you've made. If you're keen to keep watching, here is a link to the initial setup in this beautiful embroidered notebook in case you want to see how I'm tracking things for the year. And underneath that is a link to the playlist of all of my reading journal videos throughout all of 2024.